Hey VC, how's it going? Right, okay, I've listened to 3 albums today, and I'd say that each of these records are examples of artists trying to rewrite their own history. Well, certainly with reissues of these albums, they've all tried to, I suppose, blur what we knew about these records or the making of these records. So, for example, first up, Let It Be Naked by the Beatles. Now, I'm pretty sure I don't need to say anything about the Let It Be album. That's been done to death over the last couple of years following Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary, but this came out in 2003, so over 20 years ago now, and it sort of follows, well, it's certainly Paul McCartney's baby, because throughout the 90s and perhaps before that, at any given opportunity, McCartney would tell us how Phil Spector ruined the Let It Be album, how the other 3 Beatles and Alan Klein allowed Spector to come in and throw those syrupy strings all over the tracks. Now, what this album was meant to do was set the story straight, so this basically includes the original versions of the likes of The Long and Winding Road, minus Spector strings. There are a few other different takes on here. It includes Don't Let Me Down, the John Lennon tune, which replaces the improvised songs on Let It Be, which were Dig It and Maggie May, which is interesting. It was an interesting release, but I'm not sure it's a good album. I'm not sure it plays like an album, so it feels like an extension of the anthologies that came out in the mid-90s, which were very interesting, great to hear at the time, but this isn't an album that I've returned to very often. And with the benefit of having seen Peter Jackson's 8-hour Get Back documentary, I'm not necessarily sure about the value of this now, but still an interesting thing. Right, so next up, this is Give Out But Don't Give Up by Primal Scream. So this came out in 1994 and was the follow-up to Screamadelica. Now, Screamadelica, one of the most important albums of the 1990s. It fused together dance music with indie guitar rock, with dub, obviously produced by Andrew Weatherall. It won the Mercury Music Prize. So by 1994, like 3 years after that, the anticipation for this album was massive, and I think most people who first heard this were disappointed. Now, I remember hearing the first single from the album, Rocks, on the radio. I was about 18, and I'll be honest, I wasn't sure whether it was their song or whether it was an old Rolling Stones cover. I wasn't sure whether they nicked it, whatever. It was just a standard rock and roll tune. I mean, it's a great tune, but it didn't feel right, following Screamadelica. And what we know now is that following this release that came out in 2018, this is the Lost Memphis recordings. We now know that the band went over to Memphis to record with Tom Dowd, the legendary record producer. Him and Jerry Wexler produced all those great Aretha Franklin records. They recorded the album with Tom Dowd, and they came back and they played it to Creation, their label, to Alan McGee. And between them, they decided that they couldn't put it out. They bottled it. So the tapes were given to George Draculius, who had produced the first Black Crowes record, and he sort of beefed up the sound. He added some bells and whistles. He put a few dance beats on it here and there, and he made this record. So the truth is, yeah, this was definitely the right record for 1994. But if I was speaking to anybody now who hadn't heard either of these records, I'll tell them to listen to this. This is a beautiful record. It wouldn't have been right to put out in 1994, but it's a beautiful, soulful record, and I would definitely recommend this to anybody that hasn't heard it. And finally, Don't Stand Me Down by Dexys Midnight Runners. So this came out in 1985, the band's 3rd album, and followed 2 massive records. So their debut, Searching for the Young Soul Rebels, of course, included Gino, which was a #1 single over here in the UK. The follow-up, Tiraille, included Come on Eileen, which was a #1 single all over the world. And this came out without much fanfare. There wasn't a single that preceded it. I don't think there's much promotion done at all, and it was a flop. It was a massive flop, and ultimately led the band to split up. But I think, I mean, any opportunity I get, I will tell you that Kevin Rowland is a genius. I think as much as any other artist, he understood that each record had to have its own personality, its own image, its own presentation. So whether that be the soul boy look that Searching for the Young Soul Rebels had, or the, you know, the dungarees and fiddles thing that Tyree had going on, this album had this sort of preppy look, you know, this suited and booted thing going on. And I think perhaps a lot of fans just didn't understand it. But if you want to know why I think that Kevin Rowland is a genius, I'll just say check out there's a short film on YouTube, which is the promotional film for the track This Is What She's Like. It's a 12-minute video, 12-minute promo, and I think this is peak Kevin Rowland. I don't think it gets any better than this. It's absolutely wonderful. So, you know, if you've got 12 minutes, check it out. But what I find interesting is when this album was reissued on CD in 2004, Kevin Rowland, he changed the track listing. First of all, he introduced a new song, a new opening song at that, so which totally changed the feel of the album, you know, a new track being introduced. He changed some of the song titles. He clearly wasn't happy with you know, how this was put out in 85, and it clearly eaten away at him for how many years? 19 years. And when he got the chance to tinker with it, he did. I'm not sure whether it's any better. I'm not sure it needed that tinkering, but it's just an interesting companion piece, I suppose. But there you go. For me, one of my favourite albums. Check it out.